ourselves as a business, take care of our team members, and take care of our customers and partners. Because if you don't do that, you haven't got a business at the end of the day. So that's what we do. Crystal ball, no, we don't have, but we do know that we have to be ready for the new dawn and for the new norm.
Appreciate it, Dimitri. Thanks for your inputs. Simon, you are a big force in the Asia Pacific. You have presence in most of the country in Asia Pacific, starting from Australia, Singapore, Indonesia, China, and India, and Vietnam. So some of the countries are pretty ahead than India in terms of the COVID-19. Some of them have recovered, some of them are back to operation. Business as usual has started, maybe occupancies are low, but things are still moving on. What's your advice on the basis of your experience in the other countries which are ahead of us for the Indian hospitality?
Well, China started this, and we have to close our hotels in China in February. And then followed by a number of hotels, like in Singapore. We did not close Singapore. We kept this open, but at low occupancy, but taking a lot of people actually can't go back, like to Malaysia and so forth, because the borders or a number of countries in Southeast Asia being closed. So Singapore is trading. Australia also closed quite early in March. Australia imposed the travel bans and the quarantine, so most of the hotels are closed or running a very low occupancy in a sense. So if you're looking at trends, if this is what we are talking about, all our hotels in China now are reopened. Our hotel in Zhuhai, which is next to Macau, last 2 weeks are doing about 40% occupancy. And so is the one in southern China in Shenzhen. And if you look at Australia, which we only really opened 2 weeks ago, our country hotel, not the city hotels, we've got a number of hotels.
Simon, I can't hear you. Simon?
Can you hear me?
Yes, better.
Okay. So our country hotels in New South Wales, which is outside of Sydney, last weekend, after we have lifted the majority of the restrictions, were full. Would you believe it? So there were pent-up demand of these people who've been sort of locked up in the home and wanted to go out and travel. So there are some encouraging signs for the countries that are yet to open, that I think there will be some pent-up demand for people who want to get out from their home and want to experience life again. But the recovery will probably be much longer.
Simon, your voice is... Simon, you're not audible.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay.
Good, Simon.
All right, much better. Did you hear about the hotels outside Sydney?
Yes, countryside.
Okay. So all I'm saying is there is recovery. If you based on experience in China, based on experience in Singapore, that we have reopened. We have just reopened Vietnam, which is has done very well in a sense, and we have reopened most of the hotels in Australia, and they are recovering in a sense. So if you're looking for trend, Nandi, I would say there will be some pent-up demand when the hotel reopen. But to get to a full recovery, I would say it will take a bit longer, 6 months to 12 months.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for your global inputs. JB, I'm coming to you. Interglobe Hotel is one of the most professional hotels in the country. As a hotel owner, what do you expect the hospitality trend for the next 12 months? You need to unmute, please.
Can you hear me now?
Good.
Yeah. So, sorry, I missed the last bit of your question. What do you expect?
So, how you see the hospitality trends for the Indian hospitality for the next 12 months?
Yeah. So, I think it is where it is, but as we all know, as we've been talking about, we have slightly different concerns other than, there's the whole demand side, and the demand side will sort of take its time. Like Dimitri said, we are dependent on so many factors. It's around government, health, social, biological, economic, and so on. And it'll probably go through its own kind of a staggered start as the country sort of resets. So it's going to be a slow one. It'll be all sort of intra-city, intrastate, and build up to intra sort of country and then intra-continent. I guess that's the phase most countries will see. But as hotel developers, we have other concerns because India as a market, we've been out there busy building a credible stack in the country, and we've got live sites running, we've got live hotels running, and a lot of capital invested, and if you look at the industry in India, almost 45,000 crores is what the industry today sort of owes out to institutions. So I think we are at a point where, of course, the whole operation piece was the simpler one to deal with, and we very efficiently shut everything down by the middle of March. But then there's all this, the funding that needs to be paid, and we are looking at options for restructuring of our loans, and we want to continue to keep growing. Sometimes, and that's very fluid because whilst those options are there, possibly the market is now moving towards more capital options as well. So I think operators like us and developers like us, we completely believe in the long term, but we have several hoops to sort of jump through in the market, and we do expect to see churn in the market, through independent players. We cannot forget the big mega trend that was there when we got into COVID around sort of a shrinking economy and consolidation that is sort of much needed in this space. So I think we'll see multiple things on the developments and supply side. Demand will take its time, it's going to take its time. And we just have to make sure that we have multiple scenarios that we keep building. It's impossible to look at the crystal ball, so we look at 6-7 scenarios at any given point in time and keep aligning ourselves to that. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. JP spoke about the debt restructuring, and that's the problem for most of the owners, and that's the solution what most of the owners are looking for. That is the biggest pain point at this point in time for the industry. Are you seeing any relief or some sort of comfort from the banks that they're open to hear you and they're ready to restructure, in your experience?
Yeah, can you hear me? Sorry, I had muted myself. So no, not at the moment. So I think the conversations are on. And, in this backdrop, I think the banks have become very risk averse. And I was asked this question a few days ago, and I think our advice to the bank is, banks need to continue to play their role in the market, and clearly they should determine the assets that they need to chase. And that's a decision that the banks will have to make. I think we are a very well-governed company, like many other companies in the country, and we will sort of get on the other side. I think we're just trying to make things more efficient for ourselves. And then there's the whole policy piece. I think there are two conversations which I think are very, very important at this stage for developers like us. One, of course, is the debt. Moratoriums are there, but they come at a price. Structuring is fundamental for us. And the big thing for the country today is using this time and this sort of a situation to drive policy. So that when we get out on the other side, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it is, we can get onto a fast track. We're a country with enormous opportunity. We only have 140,000 classified rooms in the country. That needs to double, triple. We are sitting at a $2,800 per capita across the country. That's going to grow. Demand's going to come. We have a lot of headroom, but we need to make development in India very, very competitive. And there is enough stuff out there which we can talk about later in the conversation that needs to be ironed out. So I think from my perspective, these two bits are really, really important for customer confidence. And clearly the demand drivers need to be there with infrastructure, social infrastructure, roads, highways, safety, security. And then it should work.
Zubin, JP touched very important point that there are only 140,000 organized room inventory in our country, which is probably less than 15% of the total supply side. What do you think? Maybe there got to be the contraction on the demand. Maybe we were at 60% occupancy at the industry level, probably 30%. But the branded hotels were one of the first one to get the majority of the business. You see a silver lining on that for organized players?
Yes, hi Nandi, thank you. Good morning all. Pleasure to be here, all the panelists and the audience. Nandi, I think my view on this is as follows. First of all, and I completely agree with what Dimitri said and Simon said and JB said. I think we must acknowledge that there is a crisis, right? I mean, I can answer your question in a very short manner as well, saying in the long term it's going to come back, right? But I think there has to be various steps before we get there. In the immediate term, we have to acknowledge that there is a crisis. In the immediate term, as JB mentioned, there is issues around the capital stack. There are issues around financing, survival of hotels. There are cash flow issues in the hotels, by and large, and they might come because of many reasons, and we'll not delve into that right now. But there are issues. But like Dimitris and Simon said, and we see it in the Radisson China portfolio as well, occupancies have now trended back to 40%, right? So clearly, there is going to be some normalcy which will return, right? I think I want to really kind of focus on what the topic is, and I will answer your question, Nandivardhan, but I think, I already did in a very concise manner, and happy to elaborate that later. But I think, one has to in terms of business strategy, and the reassessing business strategy is what we're talking about right now. One has to be very clear about how one thinks on, about this present situation we are in. We cannot confuse tactics with strategy. You cannot call the changes you make in the short term right now as your long term strategy. That's not what it is about. You will have to change gears. We'll have to make tactical maneuvers over the next 12 months. I think all of us are doing and going above and beyond in what needs to be done, but that doesn't comprise of a long term strategy, right? So maybe we can discuss that later if the opportunity arises today. But here's what I think, and maybe that addresses your question in a long-winded manner, but I think it's important, to kind of just highlight what I think the trends might emerge to be, right? I would like to look at it as the short term and the long term, right? And the short term, let's define it as the next 6 to 12 months. Some might choose to call it 18 months, but, absolutely okay, to go to that level of stretch. The long term being 3 to 5 years, right? And we have to look at where India is today and where our industry is poised in India today, right? So here's how I kind of look at it from various angles. So in the short term and in the long term, what's going to happen to demand? I think we are in a demand shock in the short term. Businesses, occupancies have absolutely evaporated. In fact, over a period of over 1 week or less. I remember, second week of March, portfolio was sitting north of 75% average occupancy. Third week of March, we were sitting near zero occupancies. And that's not our truth. I think that's generally the industry at large, right? So we are in a demand shock, right? In the long term, I think the demand shock will normalize, it will emerge. The good things about, so what's happening on supply, right? I think the new supply will be stalled, right? Whatever's in the pipeline right now, ready to open in the next 6 to 12 months will open, perhaps with a 6 to 12 months delay, right? In the long term, I think supply will return. So what does a lack of supply do to demand, right? It gives demand a steeper recovery, right? So demand shocks, usually recover much better, and I think it's going to be a steeper recovery whenever it comes. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but I just want to put it in the bigger perspective, and that's when things will start moving. I think in terms of efficiency and ROI, return on investment, what's going to happen in the short term? I think we've gone through a hard reset. There is at this point in time, depending on the investment view, very little ROI in the business. in the long term, I think it is probably an opportunity for many investors, and there's going to be significantly high ROI because the industry has gone through a hard reset. There is a significant amount of efficiency that will come out of the industry. I do believe that as an industry, there we were inefficient. There was a lot of inefficiencies at many places, and we've never actually gone through a hard reset. So the right thing to do at this point is to look at unlocking those efficiencies. Right now, the market. Right. So hopefully that addresses your question, Nandivardan, in a kind of a long-winded manner. But I think it's important for me to say what I said. What's going to happen to India as a destination? Right. Again, the short-term and the long-term view. Right. I think we have to realize it's 87% domestically driven. Majority or most of our growing demand segment is the millennials, right? 65% of our country is under 35 years, right? So clearly that's the sector which is going to grow. I think this is an opportunity in the long term for India to be poised as a major destination driven on domestic demand, right? So all these factors are going to now. So that's where I see the silver lining of the cloud, like you said, right? And on lastly, on the development bit, I think this will open up tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 markets in the long term, right? In the short term, again, it's going to open up many drive-to locations. So that's the long and the short of it. I think I've spoken enough. I'll hand it back to you. Thanks, Nandivardan.
Thanks, Nibin. Rattan, coming back to you.
Mr. Ranjan, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
You have other browsers open. So I would request you to close the recorder.
Okay, Giri. Mr. Keswani, coming to you. Mr. Keswani, demand is contracting. We all can see that. Okay, and at the
I'm having a problem. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, no, I was having a problem unmuting. Sorry, could you just repeat the question? I was hearing a constant echo.
So we're going to see contraction in demand. Okay, at the same time, when there's a dip in the revenue, the first impact is going to be on the bottom line. So the entire industry right now focusing on the cost control, cost cutting, how to bring the efficiencies. So we just touched on that subject as well, that it's time to bring the efficiencies. What Lemon Tree as a company is doing to make sure that costs are in better check and we can look towards, even with the contraction demands, break even for the next couple of quarters.
So I think Zubin, touched it very eloquently already. Fortunately, I'm happy to say Lemon Tree had very good cost efficiencies already. So therefore, we didn't struggle in the first few weeks. But having said that, the immediate ask was to look for more and look for better efficiencies and look for readdressing our business model around each and every kind of cost. And we test ran those in a lot of the hotels because we were lucky enough, though to a smaller percentage, that some of our hotels down south continued to operate. So therefore, it was just not a thought in theory, it was a thought that we could actually put into practice. So a lot of hotels in Hyderabad and Chennai continued to operate. And that's where we test ran a lot of things around heat, light and power, payroll mixes, menu mix changes, different kind of supplier contracting and vendor partnerships. So that gave us the trial on how we could put it across the board when other hotels would open. And thankfully, that has at least created enough cash flows over the last 3 months to keep us afloat. And now as more and more hotels open, we will put those learnings and practices back into the system. But these are extraneous circumstances that these things have been put into. As the market evolves, the fears go down, some habits will creep back in. So you'll have to keep, maneuvering this over the next 3 or 4 months to strengthen that part. But that was the first stretch of, everybody's effort was to find a new business model in each and every item of expense that we could go to and relook at it to say, if this continues, let's say for another 36 months, let's not look at it as being a short-term exercise or a medium-term exercise. Maybe this problem will resurface or similar problem will resurface. So can we energize our business model in a totally different direction? Which has been the accent we've given the entire exercise. But the proof in the pudding will be once more hotels open, have we successfully tightened ourselves up? We'll wait and watch. But so far, it's holding good.
Are you experiencing any change in consumer behavior? Any change in consumer behavior?
Well, it's very early days to even sense consumer behavior. We haven't seen a consumer yet. As I said, some of the hotels that were open because of a lot of the hotels were used for quarantine customers, but that's a different service model altogether worked out with the hospital or by the government. Or we had a lot of teams staying with us on their business continuity because they had to be close to the offices in the ITS. So this is not normally the customer. All these customers are not our future customers as well. So having said that, having spoken to a lot of our normal customers and whoever we feel will be our future customers, I think the sense of engagement, the sense of warmth is never going to change. But the expectation of safety, hygiene that everybody's put together, I'm sure everybody do a great job on that one, will become paramount to be able to sustain and be able to touch and feel every hour or every minute of the day that they spend in our properties. That's a confidence building exercise that will need to come. Also, unfortunately, I mean, I'd speak about, our nationals, we're pretty badly behaved once things get a little better. So we'll also have to manage bad customer behavior so it doesn't impinge on the good customers who want, to get back into business. That is going to be the biggest challenge. We tend to slip up very often. And as banquets open up and restaurants open up, we'll have to manage ourselves to be able to control it, yet be still holding to the ethos of hospitality is to still present it in a warm, engaged, caring manner. And the more cared and the more safe people feel, I think the brand choice will depend upon that. But it's early days. We've all put in our practices. We've all put in our processes. I don't think anybody's test run them yet. Hotels just started to open 2-3 days ago, and some aren't opening for next month. Let's see. It's not a call that I can give with confidence saying we know what customer behavior will be. On the distribution side, like Zubin said, and JV said too, I think close by, holiday destinations will start to pick up a bit. Some are calling it revenge tourism. Some are calling it just getting it away. That will be a little pickup. How much it will be in percentage terms, difficult to say. Because again, our back-end infrastructure is not the soundest as it is in the other countries that have recovered. We heard about China, we heard about Australia, but I think the back-end infrastructure supports people moving away from home. Here, that's the limitation that we've got. But we are seeing calls, we are seeing queries coming in the last 3 or 4 days. Interestingly, queries are coming in for weddings. I'm very surprised and shocked. And they're coming in for the coming few weeks. What has kept them back and what is trying to get them, without having tested the general environment. But I think because we believe in dates, maybe that'll come together. So between the people who want to get back into business and their business continuity segments, short haul holidays, and this pent up demand for the wedding dates, maybe that'll start to happen in the next 3 or 4 weeks. My other worry, I think, is that we will have bursts of this pandemic and we will have risks of lockdown and containment zones around us. That's not going to be a picture that one can forecast. So we'll have to be nimble enough to go back into tightening up or being able to respond when that happens. And how do we hold the health and safety of our staff when that happens, because they're going to be coming in and out of those zones. And their protection to me is more important, because if I keep them healthy, they will definitely keep my guests healthy. And that should be the direction I would ask all of our people to go to.
Appreciate. Let's keep our fingers crossed that things go well for the industry. Dimitri, Are we going to see a lot of merger and acquisition opportunities in our industry in next few quarters? Do you see that's going to be the possibility?
Yeah, I think JB and I think Zubin actually said it very loud and clear. There's going to be a lot of change. Change will mean change will go both ways. Change will be a challenge for some, and there will be opportunities for others. I think there's going to be distressed assets. I think there are going to be people who are not going to make it because they a lot of people tell me, oh, I'm going to write off 2020. You write it off when you don't have any debt or anything else to service. You cannot write off a year. I mean, my wife does it every day. She writes a year off every day she has a birthday, but that doesn't actually mean anything to her. In business, it's a big thing to do. So the people will not be able to write off 2020 that easily, and that means distress assets. That means opportunities. That means people seeing opportunity coming back, and some assets are going to be cheaper than ever. Some countries are going to suffer more than others, and there's going to be other businesses that are going to suffer more than others. That creates opportunities. So I personally see there will be opportunities for people to buy distressed assets. I think there's going to be opportunity for private equity and funds to expand their reach. Banks, I don't know. I'm not a banker, but I would say banks do not want to be hoteliers, so they don't want to accumulate hundreds of assets that they won't know what to do with them. So they will work with the right buyers to actually offload those assets to the people who can really manage it for them. So the short answer to your question is yes. It will depend. It will depend on the region. It will depend on the timing. In some cases, will happen in 6 months. In some cases, it will take 2 years. So it's going to be a phased issue. But will there be opportunities? Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
Thanks, Dimitri. Simon, coming to you. There's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of people are not motivated enough. They are confused. They are not certain whether it's the right industry to be in or not. Well, I talked about the staff who are working at your unit level hotels, or the lenders, investors, or even in some cases the hotel operators as well. But they are the four wheels of any vehicle who gonna sail through your journey. How to motivate all the stakeholders of the industry? What as a leader you are planning to do, or you already doing? Simon, please unmute. Simon, please unmute.
Can you hear me now? Okay. It's a good question, Nandi. I mean, we have been dealing with a lot of things over the last few months that we have never dealt with in our lifetime, even though all of us been in the industry for a long, long period of time. In fact, when I look back over the last couple of months, I have found myself to be busier than before when the things was normal. And now closing the hotel is a real pain in a sense, dealing with supplier and staff, and all the panelists talking about cash flow. The owner is just screaming, the banks are uncomfortable. You go and run financial scenarios after financial scenarios in a sense. And when you're dealing with, like us, in a global situation, every government policy is different. Right, the UK government deal with the hotel closure differently, and they have some staff employment subsidies, and that happened in Singapore, but doesn't happen in Dubai. China is a different ball game. The government basically ordered the banks to stay away for 12 months, and you got some very strong policy in Australia. The government basically told the bank, defer all interest payment for 6 months and so forth. So every government come up with new policy every day that we have to deal with. So we are lucky enough that we have been able to maintain our infrastructure. Sure, a number of our staff have taken pay cut. That is the reality. The cash is not there, as all of you have told the audience in a sense. So I think we all are in together. I think the message that we have given to our management team and the staff is, hey, we are all in this together. We will see the light of the tunnel sometime in the future. So we're all sharing the burden. And that start with, I would say the leadership team. So if the leadership team take a pay cut, everybody else follows in the sense. If the leadership team, take no pay leave and so forth, everybody follows. So we are lucky enough that the leadership team here are very supportive. They have taken a lot of, example and showing, leading from the front, and be able to balance, the stability, the survival of the company, as well of the survival of the employee themselves. So we have gone through pain, but we're lucky enough that we have not really at this stage, make any redundancy around the world. But that day might come, Nandi. I think the painful hasn't really gone to reopen the hotel like we're doing now in China and in Vietnam. The first things that we need to do is to look at, what business might come that no one of us here would know, whether we're going to do 1%, we are going to do 20% or 50%. You actually don't know, in a sense. We are very much at the mercy of the airlines, right? And they don't know themselves in some way. So when you do your forecasting to reopen the hotel, you really need to forecast for conservative, income. And as such, you need to match your costs, your expenses with the income. Especially some of the staff members might not be there. So at this stage, we have been able to convince a lot of our staff in Vietnam and so in China, they take turns. So they are not working, 48 hours a week. Some of them are only working 10 hours a week. So they share the job. So I think the motivation, Nandi, to answer your question is, I think we all need to show leadership. We need to share the pain with the staff. We need to show them there is light to the end of the tunnel. We are still here with them. The industry will recover. I mean, if you look back at SARS, if you look back at GSC, I think it will recover. It's the degree when it will recover and how long it will take, in a sense. Most people in this industry are passionate, as all of us are, in a sense. I think they will continue to be committed to the industry. We just need to share the pain and the gain with them together going forward. And then I think we still got a few more months to go yet.
Thanks, Simon. So when coming to you, ancillary revenue is something which a lot of hotel companies are focusing on. What in your organization you are looking at? How you are looking ancillary revenue to pop up? Okay, I'll come to Zubin again. Now we don't have him here. Simon, if I look towards Park Regis Dubai, their room to employee ratio is 0.6. Okay, whereas it's an upscale hotel with a multiple F&B outlets. Why in India your hotel operations are having room to employee ratio 1.5 or maybe more in some cases?
I think it comes down to practices and culture, in a sense. I mean, if you look at, if you're talking about efficiency, that's what you're talking about, Nandi, yeah? So if you look at the highest cost country to run hotels are Australia, very high cost country. You got very strong union, same with UK, same with Canada and US in a sense. So your payroll cost in those countries is about 40% of your turnover. So the first thing any manager will learn when you come into the hotel industry in those highest cost countries is to run very efficient cost structure. People need to be able to multitask. That's number one thing in a sense. And they need to have flexibility. So I think that would come. I mean, I can see changes in China. When we used to operate hotels in China 20 years ago, the staffing ratio was 1 to 1.25, 1.5. Not happening in China now. China, the staff ratio is below 1, in a sense. In most cases, it's actually below 0.75. So I think that will come to India in the sense. I think over time, competitiveness, and when there is a lot more tourists coming into India, and I agree with what Sanjay and Subin said that India is really got a lot of potential to grow in a sense. It's only got a very small piece of the inbound tourists of the world. I think it's less than 1%, am I right, in a sense? So I think when that comes, and that day will come, whether it's going to be 5 years or 10 years time, I think the investor will demand much better productivity from the hoteliers in the stand, and that will flow all the way down to the management team and the staff and so forth. So I think those are the efficiency we'll build when we have better technology and people do understand and how's it work culturally and they have seen how other hotels operate in other countries and regions.
Thanks, Edmund. Rattan, coming to you, we all were expecting some sort of relief from the government in taxation structure, in the liquidity surplus coming from the government. But unfortunately, government choose not to take any sector-specific view. They over the economy level, they declare a few relief. But from specific to hospitality or tour and travel industry, there was a lot of disappointment. Is it a time where the industry need to come together, the trade bodies and all the hotel operating companies, and to again pursue this movement with the government? Because for a lot of hotels, it's a question of survival.
The simple answer to your question is absolutely. Has the effort been made with a lot of the associations and bodies even earlier? The answer is it has been. Unfortunately, in our country, despite having, maybe we have too many associations and too many representative bodies, it's been a very fragmented business. And you know, the branded player supply has been limited. A lot of the supply historically has been unbranded, single-owned hotels who then want to work it out with their own motivations and how they see their local structure. The second part, unfortunately, in our country is tourism, hospitality, hotels, even a basic economy, single-owned hotel. In the minds of our gubernatorial systems, it is still considered, unfortunately, an elitist industry. It's just a mindset that governments and bureaucrats seem to have. As long as that mindset doesn't get wiped off, associations and demands are not going to get us anywhere. As other governments have responded, you know, let's keep hotels out of it. Everybody's, you know, responded to the aviation industry because that is also what's going to drive hospitality. In India, we're almost letting them die, despite having seen, for the other kind of reasons, the cost of unemployment and its impact with the death of Jet Airways and Kingfisher. But unless and until, you know, the politicians and bureaucrats wake up to the impact of it, both not just the economic impact, but just the size of unemployment impact and the impact socially, because in unemployment and now also coming in people that you took time and effort to educate and train. Today, the unemployment is not in the uneducated sector as it was earlier. Today, a large part of the unemployment in our sector is educated human beings. And we are not seeing the social and mind impact that can have. And then we keep talking about our demographic dividend and our population is the youngest and et cetera, and therefore will drive the engine of economy. Yet we are not looking at supporting those educated people who have the right aptitude and attitude to do multi-tasks under multiple industries. It's a disappointment. So I think the industry, unfortunately, will have to, till the mindset changes, have to look after themselves. Is it the right thing? No. Is it reality for the moment? The Prime Minister has made so many statements around, you know, tourism being the sixth pillar of our economy. Nothing moves. I mean, these are just great announcements and great, you know, anachronisms that we put together, you know, announcing schemes, but that doesn't help. So I think the industry needs to get together. It's got to be district-wise, state-wise, that, you know, people get to help each other and then make the industry grow, and hope that the government puts in at least some effort on infrastructure. Forget about giving the industry financial support. I think waiting for financial support to happen is a waste of time. I think we should move on. The unfortunate part, therefore, is while demand has crashed, supply will also crash. So in those dynamics, the mix will change. And the ones who maybe have deeper pockets or have put in practices to survive a little longer will be able to gobble up the demand that would have gone across to the other supply. It's going to be uncertain, but I don't expect very much of support from the government. From any conversation that we've had, we haven't seen, barring some sympathy, not even empathy. So that's how it is. So we'll have to look after ourselves. So let's move along with it.
I appreciate for being so candid and straightforward. That was really an insight for the industry. Coming from an industry leader like you means a lot. So we are the last slide. I request all the panelists, and we can start with you. What are those three things which you are doing in your organization to revive the business, to come up with as a leader?
Who do you want to go first?
Rattan, please you.
Okay, so revival, I think, is right now state-centric. There are new segments for the moment. While it's not something that one totally feels happy about. The growth in the quarantine and self-quarantine business has helped us. Is it the best business to do? No, it is good business to do, and we're able to keep, that semblance going. I think the people who will require teams to stay onboarded in a safe environment and yet have a work from home environment within the hospitality environment will be the segments that will move. We'll have to manage to get a lot of our staff back, get them checked out, and maybe house them within the hotel itself, so that their movement is curtailed, so that they don't land up going to the wrong zones and for no fault of theirs somehow get impacted. In terms of focus of segment, I think it'll be small domestic leisure close by first. Next will be domestic leisure stroke events or weddings, if you may call it that way. And the large part of the corporate business that needs to come back for them to put their businesses back on its feet. These are the four parts I think that will work in the next 6 months, maybe 8 months. I don't see anything else happening, but this will all be dependent upon access opening up, whether it's road access and no border closures, most certainly airline access. Today, whatever flights are flying, and I saw some numbers in the morning, 30% occupancy. These are all people who got stuck in a different city. These are not business travelers. They're just waiting to get back home. So these numbers are a misnomer. Let these numbers settle down over the next 15 days, and let's see if true airline traffic driven for leisure or corporate travel starts to happen. But it will be very dependent upon how airline seats fill up and borders open up. There is demand. There are lots of queries, but will the queries be converted? No. It will be very localized, very local centric.
Thanks. Thank you, Rattan. Simon, coming to you. What are those three things you are doing to make sure you revive the business as early as possible? Simon, can you hear me? Okay, Dimitri,
I'm having a hard time hearing what you're saying.
Okay, Simon, I can repeat a question for you. I'm saying that can you tell us the three things as a leader which you are planning to do or already doing to revive the business?
I think the revival of the business, Nandi, is it's just not about getting new business. I fully agree with Rattan saying that you would have your domestic leisure to start with, you might have your interstate leisure business, and then you will build on corporate. I think the revival strategy is really looking at our business model completely in the sense, right? Can you hear me, Nandi?
You just have to click on there. Turn it on.
Okay. I think each of our hotel, and I'm sure you all are doing exactly the same, we are now looking at different financial scenarios. From an income standpoint, and from a manning structure standpoint, and an expense standpoint, right? I think it will go through a 3, 6, 9, 12, 18 month period in a sense. I don't think all of us can expect to have the same manning level, the same structure in the short term. We might have to do different things, in terms of providing service to the customer. And now we never in our prestigious restaurant we never provide takeout or takeaway in the past of delivery. We might have to look at that in the sense. We seldom provide outside catering in the sense we might have our banquet department have to look at that, in the sense. So all our hotel management team now have been asked to go and strategize from an income standpoint and from a cost standpoint, and how they can build a sustainable business model in the short term and also in the medium term. And frankly, I don't think anybody would know exactly how the airline will come back and how do they come back in the sense, and how much they want to charge when you fly from Delhi to Mumbai, right? So I think we need to look at all different financial scenarios, no different to when we started closing those hotels and look at ways to do it efficiently and effectively. I think we're all still learning in a sense, and we have to deal with a lot of uncertainty and continue dealing with them and coping with them the best we could.
No, you switch it on again. Switch it on, no problem. Switch on, click on the video button.
Dimitri, can we have your views as a leader?
I'm gonna be quick because I can hear other people getting ready for the sessions. For us, it's very simple. Control the controllables. Read the terrain. Understand what is happening in the landscape. Take care of your stakeholders. Take care of your people. Take care of your customers. Make the difficult decisions and move on. And when I lived in South Africa, I learned a very interesting lesson from my friends the Zulus: be first, be fast, or be food. So make sure that whatever you do it fast. You are really understand what the landscape looks like, and move on. I don't think any government official, anybody's going to do the work for me. It's not going to negotiate stuff for me. I need to take care of my people. I need to take care of my customers. I need to take care of my hotels. I need to involve all the stakeholders and move on. Be first, be fast, be good, and as I said, read the terrain and control the controllables. That's the whole thing. A lot of people talk about the new norm. I don't know if the old norm actually made sense. So we need to understand, how many people actually wanted to move out of the old norm to move to the new norm. We've seen more changes in 3 months than we haven't seen in 3 decades. So I'm ready for the unexpected, and I'm cautiously optimistic, and I'm excited about the future because I'm still alive. The people around me are healthy. Our team members are well, and I'm going to face whatever challenges I've got together with my clients and my stakeholders. That's what I'm planning to do. Not just me, but everybody who works with me and everybody who's part of my team. And I'm really excited about it. That's what I've got to say. That's the plan.
Wyndham, Dimitri, I can say only one thing: Wyndham is in safe hands.
No, you know what? It's in our hands. We are the apostles of change. If we don't do this, nobody's going to do it for us, guys. I mean, it's, as I said, nobody's going to negotiate this lease or nobody's going to negotiate this contract for me. It's my team and I that have got to do this, and we've got to do it bearing our customers and our guests in mind. And we read the terrain and we control the controllables. And that's it.
That's very encouraging, Dimitri. So, it's good to have you back. We are on the last leg. Can I have 3 things from your side which you are planning to execute in your organization, or you already executed, to revive the business back?
Okay. Yes, I'm sorry. I think I was logged out by the system, but I'm glad I'm back on. You said this is the last question, right? So I would have loved to obviously contribute more, perhaps next time. I think our go forward plan strategies really evolve around the following. I think one has to prioritize the future, right? You have to empathize with all stakeholders, be it owners, be it your employees, or be it your colleagues. I think you have to invest in your employees. That's the one very important element where at this point in time, it is important to keep them together, bear the pain together. and keep them together. I think I mean, of course, business realities always govern decisions, but I think in the longer run, we shouldn't let the performers go, because we will all be rehiring in 12 months or less, and it's not a smart move to let your best people out and let them go. I think this is the time when that has to really be a priority for all businesses. And then I think innovation. We'll all have to be innovative at whatever level. We will have to be innovative, think out of the box. This is not a usual vanilla situation. This is an out of the box situation, which requires out of the box solutions. And I think we have to look at it in perspective. I'm sorry I went to 4 and 5, but we have to look at it in perspective. We have to see, and that's perhaps something which I believe in personally myself. You have to look at it in the longer run. Let's say 40 years, 50 years is the average working career. You have to look at what this 6 month means in that 40-year period, right? It's probably 1% or less, right? So it's a tough situation. We are all in it together. We have to come out of it. It is a crisis. I'm not undermining that by being overly optimistic, but all I'm saying is it is important to look at things in perspective, and we will have to innovate. This is going to change us and change our industry in more ways that we know, right? That much is already written on the wall. So just a few things, and I'm sorry I had some technology issues, but I'm glad I could get in on the last line. Thank you.
With this, I can for sure say that our entire leadership here today at this panel is very motivated. They strongly believe, they're pragmatic. They believe we will revive, and we need to revive together as an industry. Really appreciate all of your presence. Simon Bond, big thanks you. And Rattan Keswani, thanks a lot. Thank you, Dimitri. Thank you, Zubin, for being present today with us and for your great insights. We're looking forward to many more sessions again with you in the near future. Thank you very much.